Let's do this. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indie Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indie Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indie Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on X__Jonathan Smith if you want to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indies Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Got a big show today. Just a lot of football stuff. Football season, it's officially underway. Hall of Fame game tonight, 8 o'clock on NBC. I believe you can listen here if you're in your car, 14:30 a.m. And I want to start with football stuff. We got a little bit of WNBA. Sophie Cunningham, she has a podcast. Not a fan of that, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. And I'll tell you why. We're going to talk a little bit about the baseball trade deadline today. And by that, I mean, we're going to talk about what the Cubs can do, because as a Cubs fan, that's really all that I care about. And the National League, I think, is we'll get into that a little bit later. But I want to start with CBS Sports. CBS Sports had an article come out a few days ago. Calling it an article probably isn't right. They had a list come out. Pete Prisco, who's covered the NFL for a decent number of years, sent out a ranking of the top 100 players in the NFL. And the NFL Network does this every year, but it's the players' rankings, and the players get it wrong every single year. They just do. And so I went through Pete Prisco's. I think it's pretty accurate. You can be nitpicky and be like, oh, this guy should be 4 slots higher. This guy should be 3 slots lower. Whatever. You can do that with a list like this. But you don't care about that. And honestly, I don't either. What I wanted to know when I looked at the list is how many Indianapolis Colts players are on the list. Because if you're one of the top 100 players in the NFL, you are elite. You are. If you're top 50, you are in the elite of the elite. So I was like, how many Colts players are on here? What positions do they play? And where are they ranked? The Colts have 2 players on the list of the top 100 players in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor is on the list, and he's 50th. Quinn Nelson is also on the list, and he's 80th. And I've been very vocal that I don't think the Colts are going to be very good this year. And this is why. There's just not enough good players. There's not enough great players on the roster. Jonathan Taylor, great player. Quinn Nelson, great player. Whether you like that Chris Ballard took an offensive guard 6th overall in an NFL draft or not, you cannot deny that Quinn Nelson has been one of the best offensive guards in the NFL ever since he's entered the league. The issue is, that's it. Everything else is okay or solid. Like you can't even make an argument for anyone else on this Colts roster to be on this list. There's zero argument to be made. You can't argue for Michael Pittman Jr. You can't argue for, let me think, who else? Bernard Raymond. You can't argue for Zaire Franklin or Kwity Paye or who else? Trevarius Ward. Whoever. There is no argument for any other Colts player to be on this list whenever you sit down and you go through it. And you expect for me to bet on a team with 2 great players to win 8 games with a bad quarterback, whether it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, they're both not very good. That's really tough for me to believe. Now, the good news for the Colts is that the rest of their division isn't very good either. Okay? They, the 2 players in this top 100 list that the Colts have, that is twice as many players as the Tennessee Titans, who had 1, Jeffrey Simmons, who came in at 79th. He's the big defensive tackle. And they're the only team that I'm sure that the Colts are going to be better than, because their roster, like the Colts roster, average at best. That Titans roster is below average at best. Now, Cam Ward may show up and he may be awesome and he may shift things around for them, but The Titans are the only team that I'm sure that the Colts are better than. The Jaguars also have two players in this NFL top 100 players list that CBS Sports put out a few days ago. Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver, he was ranked 44th. And Josh Hines Allen is 76th. So both of those guys are ranked higher than the Colts players, and they play more important positions. And this is the thing with the Colts that I really struggle with. All of their best players play positions that aren't super important. Like running back, there are so many good running backs in the NFL. It's not even funny. Like you can walk out onto, fill in the blank street in Indianapolis, and you can probably find a guy who can play running back. Because you just get the ball and you say, where is nobody? There. Let me run that way. Now, obviously, Jonathan Taylor's great, and he impacts winning because he's such a great running back. But there are a lot of good running backs in the NFL. There just are. Offensive guard. I think it's becoming a more and more important position because you've got guys like Jalen Carter in the NFL and Chris Jones with the Chiefs, and you had Aaron Donald. Like there are now defensive tackles in the NFL who can really rush the passer and can really impact both the run game and the pass game. With that being said, if you were building an NFL team from scratch, you would take left tackle and right tackle and probably center before you took a left guard. That's just the very simple reality of it. And even when we move off the list and we highlight the best players on this Colts roster, we continue to see guys at positions that aren't the most important things in the world being the better players on the roster. Like when you go to the defense, Javarius Ward's probably the best player, which is good because that corner position is very important, and Javarius Ward is going to impact winning for the Colts this season. Who's the second best player on this defense? Is it DeForest Buckner? Maybe, but I'd rather have a good edge rusher than a good defensive tackle, and the Colts don't have a good edge rusher unless Leatu Latu really makes a leap. Cam Bynum is towards the top of the list of the better players on this Colts defense. He plays safety. Safety is the running back of the defense. There's a lot of ones that are serviceable, and unless you're Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore or Minka Fitzpatrick, who was in Pittsburgh and is now in Miami, like unless you're one of those two guys, like you're not impacting winning as much as a great edge rusher. You're just not. And then offensively, the best players on the offense, once again, play the positions that are not of the utmost importance. And then you compare that to a team like Jacksonville, who I would be much more inclined to take at over 7.5 wins because their best players are at very important positions. Brian Thomas Jr. plays wide receiver, a more important position than running back. Obviously, the most important position on the offense is quarterback, followed by left tackle. And then you can make a case that wide receiver is the third most important position on an offense. Defensively, Josh Hines Allen, 17.5 sacks 2 years ago. He got hurt last year. That's why his numbers were down. Yeah, that dude's a beast and is going to impact winning in a big way for them. They play more important positions, and that is important. Also, Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. New head coach. All those things. The Texans, and this is why I'm taking them to win this division. They went 5-1 in divisional games last year, by the way. The Texans have the most players in the AFC South on this top 100 NFL players list that CBS Sports put out. Derek Stingley Jr., cornerback, is 23rd. Daniil Hunter, edge rusher, is 47th. Will Anderson Jr., another edge rusher, is 56th. And Nico Collins, wide receiver, is 67th. All four of those guys, well, here, two of those guys are ranked higher than any Colts player. They have more guys on that top 100 list than any other team in this division. All four of those guys play an incredibly important position. Derek Stingley Jr. plays corner. Like you have to have a good cornerback number one in the NFL if you want to win games. Danielle Hunter, edge rusher. I don't have to explain the importance of that. Will Anderson Jr., 56th, edge rusher. Another guy on the other side who can go get the quarterback when it's, the fourth quarter and there's 2 minutes and 37 seconds left and you have to go 75 yards and score a touchdown to beat the Texans and you only have 2 timeouts left and Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter can just kind of pin their ears back and go get you. Good luck. Oh, and then, of course, you got Derek Stingley Jr. out there covering your best wide receiver. Good luck. Oh, and then they've got Nico Collins, who's one of the guys that I thought should have been ranked higher because that dude is just an absolute stud. Gives the Colts issues every time they play. Now, maybe Javarius Ward kind of neuters him a bit, but we'll see. So in this division, the Texans have the most great players. Okay. They have the best quarterback in the division, CJ Stroud, whether, it's really interesting. Like, people loved him after his rookie year, probably a little bit too much, and then he had a sophomore slump. Now, people, I think, are down on him more than they should be when you consider the fact that he was sacked the second most in the NFL last year. I get it, the offensive line, it's a work in progress, but they won 10 games last year with a bad offensive line. And they went 5-1 in the division last year with a bad offensive line. So they have the best quarterback. They've got the most great players of any other roster. I would argue that DeMeco Ryans is the best head coach in the division as well. How can you not pick them to win this division? How can you not do it? More great players, the best quarterback, the best head coach, a really tough defense that I think is going to be so stout this year. Like, that Texans defense, that's why they won games last year. It wasn't because of CJ Stroud and his magic. It was because that defense is legitimately nasty across the board. So the Houston Texans should, without a doubt, be your bet, if you're a betting person, to win the AFC South. There was one other thing about this top 100 list that really jumped out at me. The Eagles have 10 players on the list. Like, that's absurd. That is more than any other team. And that's why they're the favorite to come out of the NFC. How they're not favored to win the Super Bowl is beyond me. It really is. They are the third favorite behind the Ravens and the Bills. I can't really believe it. With that being said, if I had to bet the Eagles over-under, I would bet the under. I'll tell you why later on, coming up here in like 7 minutes, because I'm going to run through 10 over-under bets that I really like. But in terms of just pure talent and what the rosters look like, and I don't know, what we saw this team do to everybody in the playoffs last year, I mean, like, they just obliterated teams to close the season. And by the season, I mean the playoffs. They blew out the Washington Commanders, which wasn't the most surprising thing ever. Like, the Commanders overachieved quite a bit last year. But I mean, and then they beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. It's the same thing. They just tore them to pieces. 10 players. I mean, that is absurd. And a lot of them play important positions. Quinyon Mitchell, corner. Cooper DeJean made the list. Corner. Jalen Carter made the list. Defensive tackle. You just work your way through. Jalen Hurts is on the list. Quarterback. Both of their offensive tackles are on there. In fact, they were like 13th and 14th. I mean, great players at positions of high importance. That is why the Eagles have been really good for what feels like the last 5 years now. Because when you look up and down their roster, their best players play the most important positions in football. Meanwhile, the Colts, who have just kind of pedaled around in mediocrity for the past decade, with the exception of the Phillip Rivers year, it's for the opposite reason. They've been mediocre because their best players play the positions that aren't super important. And that's a problem that needs to be fixed at some point Whether, that problem is fixed by Chris Ballard or someone else, I don't know. We'll see. But at some point, we have to see this Colts roster flip to where their best players are playing the most important positions on the field. And going into the season, it doesn't appear that way right now. Now, maybe Leatu Latu makes a big leap, and we're talking about him like he's the best player on the defense. Then, that would obviously change things. Maybe, A.D. Mitchell finally figures it out, and he comes out, and he's a stud, and he's the best receiver on the Colts this year. Then that would obviously change things. But I don't think that those two things are going to happen. So we'll see. I just don't think that the Colts are good enough at the most important positions to get to that 8-win mark, and definitely not to win this division. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I've got bets that I'm eyeing. I don't know if I'm going to bet them or not, but I am very, very intrigued by all of these. I probably won't bet all of them. I'm probably going to sit down and look at them just a little bit more, because maybe if I stare at them just long enough, I'll be able to figure out whether or not the bet is going to hit. So when we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, I'm going to give you those 11 bets that I'm kind of looking at because I like them. I'll tell you what they are when we come back here in about 4.5 minutes.
If it's in today's sports world, it's here. The real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. You can head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X__Jonathan Smith if you want to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indy's Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. And if you're in the Indianapolis area, of course, 1430 AM if you want to listen in your car on the radio. Now, football season, it's here. It starts tonight. We got the Hall of Fame game, Chargers, Lions, 8 o'clock on NBC. Will you watch? I will probably not, because it's the preseason, and the only team I believe worth watching in the preseason this year is the Indianapolis Colts, because they're the only team who's got something important going on, and that is a quarterback competition. Shout out to Sean McVay for convincing every NFL head coach that it is pointless to play players in the preseason. Now it doesn't really feel like it matters anymore. With that being said, I am looking at bets because last year we did pretty well in the betting the over/under department, and I would like to do really well again this year. And the first one that I'm looking at, I haven't officially bet any of these, as you know, or you may not know. I wait until the last possible minute because I want to know who gets hurt in training camp. Like if you bet the Cowboys over before the the start of this week, then you're probably kicking yourself right now because multiple guys have gotten hurt. So that's why we wait until training camp's over and the season is about to begin. So I'm looking at the Packers a lot. Their over-under is set at 9.5. If you bet them over 9.5 wins, it's at plus 105. And my hesitation is Jordan Love is the biggest procrastinator in the sport. You know, like the first 8 games, he's not very good. And the Packers are like 4-4, 5-3. Maybe they're 3-5, whatever it is. And then he looks at me, he's like, wait, I've only got 9 games until the end of the season. Like, let me start to play well, and then he turns into like a gifted English student who waited, an hour before the deadline to write a 4-page paper. And then he just starts running off points and he's throwing for a bunch of yards and he's super decisive. And then the Packers go 6-3 in their final 9 games. He's done that basically 2 years in a row now. And I think that's good enough for the Packers to get 10 wins. I like their depth chart. There's not a ton of great, but there's a whole bunch of good. I mean, just a lot of, like, you work your way up and down. It's like, yeah, like, that's a good player. Like, Josh Jacobs is a good player. Jaden Reed's a good wide receiver. Christian Watson is a good wide receiver. They just drafted another good receiver, Matthew Golden, out of Texas. Romeo Doubs is a good receiver. Tucker Kraft, great tight end. Their backup tight end, pretty good, Luke Musgrave. The offensive line in Green Bay seems to always be good, and it's always a priority. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball, and it's like Xavier McKinney, yes, please, one of the better safeties in the NFL. Lucas Van Ness, yes, please. Kenny Clark, defensive tackle, absolutely. Isaiah McDuffie, please, that sounds great. You just got to keep working your way through it. And it's like, man, there's a lot of good players. I love the coaching staff, and 9 wins is too few. This is a double-digit win team. The schedule, aside from being in the NFC North, really isn't that crazy. Okay, it's not. Obviously, they open with Detroit. They play Washington at home, who people are kind of down on. So let's say they start 0-2. They're at Cleveland, they should win that one. At Dallas, that game's very winnable. They're playing the Bengals at home. I think the Bengals are being incredibly overrated, right? More on that later. Okay, like that game, very winnable. All of a sudden, they're 3-2. At Arizona, 4-2. At Pittsburgh, 5-2. Carolina at home, 6-2. Philadelphia at home, probably a loss, 6-3. And then they're at New York, 7 wins. Minnesota at home, 8 wins. At Detroit, probably a loss. Chicago at home, 9 wins. At Denver, probably a loss. At Chicago, maybe a win. Baltimore at home, we'll see. And then Minnesota, that'll get you to 10. So I like the Packers at the over 9.5 wins mark. Raiders. I like them at over 7.5. So eight wins for the Raiders because I think this team's going to be pretty good. But you can still get them at plus money, or excuse me, you can get them at minus 120 if you want to take them over 6.5 wins. Over 7.5 though is plus 145, and I like the plus money. And I think this Raiders team is good. The only concern is the defense. But with that being said, they won 4 games last year with a combination of Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and Desmond Ridder playing quarterback. I know Purdue fans probably don't like it when I say this, but when Aiden O'Connell's your starter, you're not going to win very many football games. Going from Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder to Geno Smith is a huge upgrade. Like you could argue that the Raiders upgraded more than any other team in the NFL at quarterback and head coach this offseason because Pete Carroll is a much better head coach than Antonio Pierce. So they have a better coach, a better quarterback. Max Crosby's back. Okay, their schedule, I don't think, is that tough. Okay, aside from being in the AFC West, obviously. But like the schedule, there's 8 wins on there. There's definitely 8 wins on there. Okay. At New England's very winnable. Even if they go 0-6 in their division, they can still get to 8 wins. And they're probably not going to go 0-6 in their divisional games. Right. So at New England, that's probably a win. At Washington's winnable. Probably won't win it though. Chicago at home, like that's very winnable. At Indianapolis is 1,000% winnable because the Colts are not going to be very good this year. Tennessee at home is very winnable. Jacksonville at home is very winnable. Dallas at home is very winnable. Cleveland at home is very winnable. That's 7. And we haven't even gotten to the Giants who they're going to play again. Like that's 8. And that is once again assuming they go 0-6 in divisional games, which probably isn't going to happen because divisional games are always tough. So the Raiders over 7.5 wins at plus 145 feels nice. If you want to play it a little safer, you can go at over 6.5 wins at minus 120. Patriots over 7.5 wins is minus 165. This is the issue with waiting. If you'd gotten this number as soon as the numbers came out, I think it was like minus 115, minus 120, somewhere around there. This one for me is pretty simple. New head coach and Mike Vrabel, who everyone knows is one of the better head coaches in the NFL. Drake May in year 2 after a pretty solid rookie season. And then a potentially really good left tackle in Will Campbell. They took him with the 3rd overall pick. So if he pans out, then you're checking the 3 most important boxes: head coach, quarterback, and left tackle. And we know that Mike Vrabel is going to find a way to put a good defense out there on that field. So 8 wins for them in a bad division because I don't think the Dolphins are going to be very good and the Jets are going to be bad again. Like that is very much within the realm of possibilities. You could take it up to 8.5. That feels a little greedy. But you can do whatever you want. It's your money, I guess. Not I guess. That is true. So if you were to take it up to 8.5 wins, that would be minus 130. If you want plus money, you'd have to go to over 9.5 wins, which I would be very surprised if that happened. If they got to 10 wins, that'd be very surprising. Steelers over 8.5 wins is plus 105. And I feel like I'm missing something. They won 10 games with Russell Wilson last year. I'm convinced Mike Tomlin could win 9 games with me as the starting quarterback. Okay, but the reason to like the Steelers isn't because of the offense. The reason to like the Steelers is because the Steelers spend their money like the U.S. government does. The United States has the largest military defense budget in the world, and the Steelers have the most expensive defense in the NFL, and they spend that money on good players. Cam Hayward, TJ Watt. They just brought in Jalen Ramsey. They signed Darius Slay in the offseason. Like Patrick Queen's one of the better linebackers in the NFL. Okay, like the defense should be one of, if not the best in the NFL. And then if Aaron Rodgers can just, score 21 points a game, then they're going to win a lot of football games. And he's throwing the ball to DK Metcalf. No more Najee Harris. They drafted Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, one of the better running backs in this draft class. They should be good enough for 9 wins this season. So Steelers over 8.5 wins, I like a lot. Seahawks under 7.5 wins at plus 115. We love the plus money over here. I really enjoy shows about movies and lawyers. Or excuse me, I really enjoy shows and movies about lawyers. And right now, I'm watching Better Call Saul, the prequel to Breaking Bad. And Sam Darnold going from the Vikings to the Seahawks kind of reminds me of a lawyer going from like a big law firm with a bunch of associates and multiple paralegals who can kind of come help you and assist you. Going from that to like opening your own practice where all you have is yourself, an assistant, and one single paralegal, all of a sudden it gets pretty tough when you're on your own like that, you know? And that is what is about to happen to Sam Darnold. He's about to basically be on his own, going from what you could argue is the best situation in the NFL for a quarterback in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, one of the better offensive-minded head coaches in the league, to one great receiver in Justin Jefferson and another really good one in Jordan Addison, a really good tight end in Hawkinson, a really good offensive line, and a defense that forced a lot of turnovers and negative plays last year. Now he's going to Seattle, which doesn't have any of that. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a really good receiver. Cooper Kupp is older, and he's okay now. The offensive line isn't very good. Under 7.5 wins for the Seattle Seahawks makes a lot of sense to me. Bucks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of 3 teams in the NFL to make the playoffs 5 years in a row. Okay. The Buccaneers remind me of my high school a little bit. By the way, we're going to take their over at 9.5 wins. That is plus 105. The Buccaneers kind of remind me of my high school. I went to school with a lot of unattractive women, and that bumped everyone up. The 6s started to look like 8s. The 2s started to look like 4s. The Buccaneers are surrounded by the Panthers, Falcons, and Saints in their division. Like, that's nothing but 4s and below. The Buccaneers, they're probably a 6, but because of that weak division, and they get, 6 games a year against them, they appear to be an 8. So I'm probably going to bet them to hit the over just because that division is so weak. They have the best quarterback in that division as well. They've got a slight weakness at pass rusher, but they went out and they signed Hassan Reddick, who's a little older, but he basically didn't play last year because he held out. So if he can get on track after sitting out most of last year, then he should plug that hole at edge rusher relatively quickly. Last year, we got on that Broncos train very quickly. I think it was over 6.5 wins. They got to 10, and we cashed. This year, the Broncos over-under set at 9.5 wins. Can they be a double-digit win team 2 years in a row? Bo Nix in year 2 should be better, coming off of a pretty stellar rookie season, right, where he went 10-7, completed 66% of his passes, threw for 3,700 yards, 29 touchdowns, and only 12 interceptions. That's a really good rookie season. Jeez. And they won a lot of those games, not necessarily because of Bo Nix, but that defense was nasty. Okay, they were 14th in points allowed. They were 7th in yards allowed. They led the league in sacks, and they led the NFL in EPA. The defense did. And then they went out and they added Dre Greenlaw, one of the better linebackers in the sport, and they added Talona Hufunga. Apologies if I butchered his name, but that only made the defense more talented and better. So the depth chart is really good. They just, extended Cortland Sutton, so he's back as their number 1 receiver again. He had a pretty solid year last year. Bo Nix in year 2, another year in the Sean Payton system. The Broncos, they're going to be really good once again. So over 9.5 wins is what I would bet for them at plus 110. I've got more bets for you when we come back here in about 4.5 minutes. I don't have a ton of unders, or I haven't read off a ton of unders, but I've got 4 unders coming your way next. Some of them make sense. Some of them don't make as much sense, but I will rationalize them for you. This is, betting game to game. I'm not very good at, but futures, that is much more up my alley. And I've got 4 unders for you when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Tickets at noon. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Now, this is Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in. No matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X __ Jonathan Smith. Follow me there to watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. I'm going to finish up these over-under bets that I'm eyeing. Haven't bet them quite yet for the upcoming NFL season. Dolphins, they're over-under. You can bet them under 8.5 wins at -195. Giving myself a little bit of buffer here because you can bet them under 7.5 wins at +100. And here's the question for the Dolphins. I don't think this roster is very good. Let me say that off the rip. Secondly, if Tua plays, they're going to win 9 games. They just are, because when he's healthy, that offense hums and they just kind of outscore people. And you can outscore people on your way to 9 wins, especially in a division where you're going to get to play the Jets twice. While I like New England, if they play a healthy Tua and the Dolphins score 24 points, I don't know if the Patriots offense has enough firepower to match that. So that's kind of the question. Can Tua stay healthy? The answer to that question is usually no. So I would bet the under 8.5 wins. If you want a little more juice, you can go under 7.5 wins. The Eagles. Sorry, I read a funny YouTube thing. Ross Campbell saying, I'm guessing Jonathan's wife wasn't his high school sweetheart and he went to a school full of dogs. Yeah, she's not. We met after I moved here. Eagles. I really like the Eagles. I said earlier in the show that they should be the Super Bowl favorite, but I'm going to take them under 11.5 wins. It's -130 for under 11.5 wins for them. If you want a little more juice, you can bet them under 10.5 wins. I like them more than that. That's really the only explanation that I have for it. So if you want a little more juice, you can bet them under 10.5 wins, which is only -165 for the Eagles. That's really fascinating. Excuse me, under 10.5 wins is +140. I misread that. Under 11.5 wins is still -130. And like I'll pay the 30% extra juice because this team's gonna win 10 games, maybe 11. 12's a lot, though. That's a lot of wins in an NFL season where your offseason is really short because you played in the Super Bowl. I've talked a decent amount on the show about the injury luck that the Eagles had last year. All 22 of their week 1 starters started their first playoff game. That is unheard of. They are going to be more injured this year than they were last year. Like, that is probably a fact. I would be very surprised if they were as healthy this year as they were last year. Okay, now the offensive line is great. Jalen Hurts is a really good starting quarterback. The defensive line is loaded. The issue is not only the shortened offseason, but this schedule that they have is brutal. They don't play back-to-back home games all year, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but I feel like having to go out on the road every other week is not desirable. So they open the season at home against the Cowboys. That's probably a win. And then they're at Kansas City, week 2. Tough game there. And then they get the Chargers at home. The Chargers are going to be really good this year. And then they're at Tampa Bay. Playing in Florida in September isn't easy for these northern teams. That game will be tough. And then they get Denver at home. Denver should be better this year than they were last year. And then they're at New York. That's a blowout. And then they're at Minnesota, a game they should probably win. But if J.J. McCarthy is good, then that game won't be easy. And then they get the Giants at home. That's a win, blowout. And then they're at Green Bay. Always tough to win at Lambeau. And I think the Packers are going to be pretty good this year. And then they get the Lions at home. The Lions have a very good roster. Once again, by week 11, you would think that their new offensive and defensive coordinators will have kind of figured things out. And then week 12, they're at Dallas, who I don't think is going to be very good this year. Week 13, they get the Bears at home, which means that by that point, you would think that Ben Johnson has things rolling there and that Caleb Williams is playing pretty well. That game could be tough. And then they're at the Chargers, another team that should be pretty good this year. That's a team that won 11 games last year. And then they get the Raiders at home, a game they should win, but the Raiders are going to be tough. And then they're at Washington, the Commanders. That game will be tough. And then they're at the Bills. That game will be tough. And then they get Washington at home. Like that is a very tough schedule. Can the Eagles win 12 games this year? Absolutely. They are more than talented enough to do so. But that's a tough schedule coming off of a shortened offseason, coming off of a year where you didn't really have very many injuries. Eagles under 11.5 wins. Will I bet it? Probably not, but it's looking at me pretty good. Next bet, 49ers under 10.5 wins. We went entirely out against the 49ers last year. That hit. It's minus 120 to bet them under 10.5 wins. And here's why you should do it. The issue that I had with the 49ers last year was how old they were. They were incredibly old. They had more 30-year-olds on their roster than any other team in the NFL. And older players in the NFL tend to get hurt more. And guess what? The 49ers are still one of the oldest teams in the NFL. Their offense is reliant on 3 guys. Brock Purdy, who knows if he's really $53 million a year good or not. I don't think he is. Christian McCaffrey, who's another year older and has a very lengthy history of getting injured. And Trent Williams, arguably the best left tackle in the NFL, but he's also the oldest left tackle in the NFL at 37 years old. They're both injury prone. If one of those 2 guys gets hurt, then this 49ers offense is going to struggle like it did last year. Last year, everyone got hurt. Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. And what happened to the 49ers? They were bad because Brock Purdy couldn't keep them afloat. And I could 1,000% see the exact same thing happening to them this season. And the NFC North, the NFC West, the division that they play in, not as tough as some of the other divisions, but it's not easy. Like I'm out on Seattle, but that defense in Seattle is going to be really good. Okay, the Cardinals just kind of hover around 500 every year. The Rams are, I think, the best team in that division. Okay, they got to go on the road to Tampa Bay. All right, they're at Houston. It's not the easiest schedule in the world. So I would bet the 49ers under 10.5 wins. And then the last under that I will be betting this upcoming NFL season is the Bengals under 9.5 wins. People love the Bengals this year. Okay, people just swear by the Bengals because it's T. Higgins and it's Jamar Chase, and they're catching the ball from Joe Burrow, one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL. And my thing is, they went 9-8 last year, and they didn't get any better. That's the issue that I have with them. Like, they took an edge rusher in the first round. That's great. I'm glad that they did. The issue is they took Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart played at Texas A&M for 3 years and barely saw the field. He was like a 5-star prospect who showed up and didn't play. And then after that, he goes to the NFL Combine and he just puts up stupidly good numbers. I mean, just an absolute specimen as an athlete. And because of that, he got a first-round grade just because of how athletic he is. He may show up in the NFL and not be very good. I think that's very possible with a guy who wasn't good in the SEC. Trey Hendrickson, still not under contract. I get it. He's back at camp, but he's still not under contract. Their starting linebacker from last year left. He's in Las Vegas now. Sorry, I'm blanking on his name. The back end of the defense, not very good. The secondary, it is not a good defense. And yes, the Bengals scored a whole bunch of points last year in losses. They averaged 28 points a game last year, and they lost 8 games, and they didn't do anything to help their defense. If you told me, Jonathan, the Bengals are going to have the 20th best defense in the NFL this year, then I'd probably bet them over 9.5 wins. The issue is, I don't think their defense is going to be that good. It'll probably be worse, and you're an injury to T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, or Joe Burrow away from being really bad. By the way, the offensive line, not very good either, except for their center. I like Ted Karras. So Bengals under 9.5 wins is the final bet that I'm looking to make this upcoming NFL season. Now, we got some Indiana Fever news. Sophie Cunningham, role player for the Indiana Fever, she has her own podcast now. And I am firmly against players having podcasts. I just think it's dumb. I do. I think Kobe Bryant did it the right way, or not the right way. He did it the best way. Kobe Bryant was just awesome in the NBA for 2 decades. Didn't do anything media related, kind of stayed out of the eye of it. And then what did he do? He retires and he writes this piece called like I Love You Basketball or whatever it was titled, and he won an Emmy. And then he never did anything media related ever again. And that is, I think, the best way to go about it. All these players who have won nothing starting their own podcast, I just find incredibly dumb. Like what is Sophie Cunningham going to really tell me that is really interesting? By the way, the Fever won last night. They beat the Mercury. They're now 6-2 in their last 8. 107-101. The Mercury, not a bad team, by the way. They were, I believe, 3rd in the WNBA standings before last night. Aaliyah Boston, big night, 22-12. Ari McDonald, 27 points. So they're fine without Caitlin Clark. By the way, Sophie Cunningham started last night, played well. Maybe she needs the podcast to play well. 12 points, plus 5, 3 rebounds, was 4 or 6 from the field. So who knows? Maybe she needs the podcast to play well. But once again, I'm just not a fan of the player podcast. I think a lot of them just spew nonsense for an hour or however long they are. Angel Reese's podcast spews a lot of nonsense. One could argue it spews nothing but nonsense. I wouldn't say that, though, because I've never listened to it aside from the clips from it that go viral. And Sophie Cunningham came out swinging. So her first episode, the co-host is like a guy from Love Island. They've been friends for a long time because they both grew up in Missouri together. So her co-host, they're talking about the WNBA and the face of the league. And here's what Sophie Cunningham had to say about who the face of the league is. Mainly here talking about Caitlin Clark.
And it literally like pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league.
Who would be?
What?
Sabrina? No.
No, there's really good, well-known people in our league. I'm not discrediting them. Like, we have a lot of badasses in our league.
Yeah.
Like, hell yeah to that. I'm all for that. But when people try to argue that she's not the face of our league, or if our league would be where we're at without her, you're dumb as
Yeah.
You're literally dumb as
Sophie Cunningham just coming out, letting it be known that Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA. And look, people love her because of that stuff right there. Okay. Like, she tackled the one girl who fouled Caitlin Clark. And from there, people have just been like, Sophie, Sophie, Sophie. And I do not like current active players having podcasts, except for Draymond Green, because that guy's won 4 titles. But at the same time, I don't mind there being a pro Caitlin Clark player podcast out there, because most of them are anti-Caitlin Clark. They just are. So I don't mind it. Do I wish it was a thing? Not really. But if she could give us sound bites like that, then you go right at it. That is more content for me, as long as she doesn't switch up. Like, if the Fever trade her and all of a sudden she's like, yeah, no, I actually, now that I think about it, I don't think Caitlin Clark's the face of the league, then like that would bother me. But as long as she keeps telling the truth, because I feel like a lot of these player podcasts don't tell the truth. They, like, just go listen to Paul George's podcast for 5 minutes and you'll be like, what in the world is this? Nonsense. That's the answer. But if she keeps talking about how good Caitlin Clark is, then she's going to be popular, and she's going to give me plenty of sound bites like that to talk about during my show. So am I a fan of it? Not really. Then again, if she plays as well as she did last night with the podcast going on, then it'll be hard for me to complain. So we'll see how things go. When we come back, top of the hour, 11 o'clock, football's back, which is awesome. But the Major League Baseball trade deadline is today. I haven't seen any big deals made quite yet. Maybe I've missed them. If I have, please let me know. And from there, so when we come back, I want to talk about the Cubs. Who could they make a big trade for? And the gap in the National League between the best team and everybody else. We'll get into that when we come back here in about 4.5 minutes.
do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket, if you head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X, _ Jonathan Smith, to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Now, Major League Baseball trade deadline is going on right now, or it ends today. The trade deadline is today, and I'm just waiting on a Cubs trade. I haven't seen one yet. Right, I'm scrolling through them. I'm looking here. I've got the Major League Baseball.com's trade tracker up. The deadline is tonight at 6:00. It is believed that the Cubs are going to be very active, and they need to be. Did you make an argument that they are the second best team in the National League? They lead the National League in run differential at plus 106. I believe they ended up pulling out that win yesterday afternoon against the Brewers. I need to check that because they are currently in second place in the NL Central. They did. They won 10-3 on the road. That's big. I know they play Saturday in the afternoon. When's their next game? Let's get this going here. They have a series starting tomorrow against Baltimore, and they could sweep them. Not gonna say that they should, but they could sweep them, no doubt about that. But with that being said, I just want them to make a move. I wanted them to trade for Eugenio Suarez, but he got dealt to the Mariners because they just need a little more juice at third base than what they have right now. They need probably another starter. Would love for them to, go get Shane Bieber, who's only started two games this year, but in 12 innings, he's given up 0 runs. That would be awesome. Probably not going to get him, though. That's a hefty price, and they need some help in the bullpen as well. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know all the bullpen arms worth getting in Major League Baseball because I don't. But what I do know is that everyone feels like they're miles behind the Los Angeles Dodgers. Like, the Dodgers are so freaking good. And that roster is just, it's loaded. It's the best roster in baseball. It is. Shohei Ohtani is minus 2,500 to win the MVP again. Blake Trinan is still in the back there of that bullpen. He's still bringing it. Will Smith's a good catcher. Freddie Freeman's still one of the best hitters in baseball. Max Muncy, I know he's on the IL right now, but that dude can still swing it. Mookie Betts can play all over the yard. They've got him playing infield from time to time. Michael Conforto out in left can still swing it. Teoscar Hernandez has got the juice at the plate. Oh, and by the way, they have Shohei Ohtani. So, they're just loaded with all of these really, really good players. I haven't even named all of them. And they just kind of feel like they're hovering above everyone else in the National League. And when you look at the teams out there, maybe the Mets could make a move or two to kind of equate themselves with the Dodgers. I know the Brewers have the best record in the National League right now. They're up 2 games in the loss column with the Dodgers. But, you heard Dan Plesac say it himself that the Brewers, their players just aren't as good as the players on the Cubs or the Dodgers. The Phillies are still really interesting, right? The Reds have kind of had surges here and there. But the Cubs or the Mets kind of seem like one of the 2 teams that could make a move or two to maybe close that gap to a point where it doesn't feel like the Dodgers are absolutely going to win the National League once again. Out in the AL, it's way more interesting. The Blue Jays are really good once again. Or not once again. They're finally good. Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I believe Max Scherzer has been pitching for them this season. Right? So, there's a lot of good players. Shane Bieber got dealt to the Blue Jays. I'm dumb. Anyway, Max Scherzer is out there pitching. Kevin Gausman is having a pretty solid year. They've got a lot of really good players as well. George Springer roaming around center field for them. So maybe the Blue Jays are the team to come out of the AL. The Tigers, they got off to that really hot start. They've slowed down a bit, 4-6 in their last 10. But the AL is, to me, significantly more interesting than the National League, just because it just kind of feels like the Dodgers are hands down the best team in the NL. But this is the beauty of baseball. Guys get hot. Guys go cold. Guys get hurt. All those things matter. So we'll kind of see what transpires today as the deadline hits us tonight at 6 Eastern. But, we'll kind of see how things go there. College football. The NFL kind of starts tonight. Is football season back? I kind of feel like it is because the Hall of Fame game is tonight. But let's be honest. You're going to turn the TV on and be like, football. And you're going to look at the Lions and the Chargers, and they're going to cut to Jared Goff, who's wearing shorts and a hoodie. And then they'll cut to Justin Herbert, who is, wearing his uniform because Jim Harbaugh's the head coach. And I'd be very surprised if everyone wasn't in uniform. But he's going to be standing there with just like his helmet. And then you're going to look at the field. You're going to be like, I don't know who any of these people are. And then you're going to turn it off. So is football back tonight? I don't know. Your call. But we're getting there. The hype trains are fully in motion. Every Anthony Richardson video is going viral. It seems like that's not true. That's just kind of how it feels, So hype trains are being formed. And CBS.com put out a list of the 100 best players in the NFL. And, you could be nitpicky and say that, this guy's too high, this guy's too low, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to talk about the AFC South, right? What players are on the list or aren't on the list and all that kind of stuff. By the way, the Eagles by themselves have more players on CBS's top 100 players list than the entire AFC South does combined. That's bizarre. Anyway, the Colts only have 2 players on the list. Jonathan Taylor is 50th, and Quentin Nelson is 80th. That's it. Those are the only 2 guys. No Charvarius Ward, no Cam Bynum, no Bernard Raymond, no quarterback on the list, no wide receiver on the list. There's 2 guys. Jonathan Taylor, running back, Quentin Nelson, the pride and joy of the Indianapolis Colts, playing left guard. And this is why I find it very difficult to believe that they're going to win 8 games or more this year. And why I find it even harder to believe that they're going to win this division. Okay? So, Roswell, thank you. The Cubs apparently did make a trade with the Orioles. Traded a young prospect for a reliever. Great. Give me more bullpen arms. Back to the Colts. This is why I find it hard for them to win 8 games. Their 2 best players are playing positions that aren't super important, and there's not a ton of great on the roster. Like, there's just not. You have a great running back in Jonathan Taylor, and you have a great offensive guard. Everything else is like pretty good, solid, average. Like, that is the makeup of this Colts roster, and that is problematic because average rosters win an average number of games. 7, 8, 9. And once again, is this Colts roster even average? I don't know. It's the same roster as last year. That's just a year older. Bringing back the same quarterback who wasn't very good last year. Daniel Jones. He wasn't very good last year either. If he was, he wouldn't be on his 3rd team in the last 2 years. Giants, Vikings, Colts. Okay. Now, with that being said, they're not going to be the worst team in this division because the Titans only have 1 player in the top 100. With that being said, Cam Ward's apparently up at 4:30 a.m., getting to the facility at 5 a.m., watching tape. He's going to work. So maybe he lifts up that franchise. But as of right now, Jeffrey Simmons is the only guy from the Titans on that top 100 player list. Okay? And they're the only team that I'm sure that the Colts are going to be better than. The Jaguars, they have 2 players on the list. Brian Thomas Jr. was ranked 44th, and Josh Hines-Allen was ranked 76th. That's a higher average ranking than what the Colts have. And more importantly, Brian Thomas Jr. plays receiver. Josh Hines Allen plays edge rusher. Wide receiver and edge rusher are more important than running back and offensive guard. Like, they play more important positions. And because of that, I am more inclined to believe that the Jaguars are going to be better than the Colts because their better players play more important positions. Travis Hunter, if he shows up and he plays well, look, I don't think he's going to be able to play every snap of every game. What I kind of expect is he'll be a full-time cornerback because he's a better corner than he is a wide receiver. And then on offense, he'll play third downs, he'll play in the 2-minute drill, and he'll play in the red zone. That's kind of how I expect for them to split up the reps. Okay, but if he hits as a corner, then all of a sudden, check 3 really important boxes: edge rusher, wide receiver, and corner for the Jaguars. So their better players play more important positions. And then you throw in the fact that Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. Better quarterback, their best players play more important positions than the Colts players. And that's really what matters. Like why are the Chiefs good every year? Because their best player is their quarterback, the best player in the NFL. Their second best player is Chris Jones, plays defensive tackle, rushes the passer. They've got really good edge rushers as well. They always have good corners. They always have at least one really good pass catcher in Travis Kelce. That's going to change a little bit this year. It's probably going to be a little more Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. So 2 good receivers. The offensive line is usually better than what it was last year. They now got, a new offensive tackle, the guy out of Ohio State who was regarded as a top 10 talent, but he tore his ACL. So there was some concern about him coming off of that. Yeah, no, he was ready for training camp. So good football teams have their best players at more important positions. And that leads me to the Houston Texans, where their best players are at the more important positions. They had 4 players, so more than any other team in the AFC South, ranked in this top 100 NFL players list. Derek Stingley Jr., corner, 23rd. Daniel Hunter, edge rusher, was ranked 47th. Will Anderson Jr. is another edge rusher, 56th. And then Nico Collins, wide receiver, 67th. They have the best roster in the division. They have the highest number of great players in the division. They also have the best quarterback in the division in C.J. Stroud. And the C.J. Stroud stuff for me is interesting. It's interesting to me, mainly because after his rookie year, there was too much hype around C.J. Stroud. And then last year, his second year, he had a sophomore slump, right? He hits this sophomore slump. And now I think people are too low on C.J. Stroud, right? Like either way, he's still the best quarterback in this division. They probably have the best coach in DeMeco Ryans in this division. And when you have the best coach and the best quarterback and the highest number of great players, then how can you not pick them to win this division? How can you not? Their best players all play important positions: corner, edge rusher, wide receiver. They have a legitimate quarterback that I've now seen win 2 playoff games in his first 2 years in the NFL. Okay? I just, incredible. Like they are the best team in the division. And if you're going to bet anything this year, I would bet the Houston Texans to win the AFC South. Very simply because I'm not going to call it a lock because guys get hurt, but they're plus 110. You get plus money on the Texans to win the AFC South. By the way, the Jags are plus 290. The Colts are plus 330. Now, I want to talk about the Eagles just because it's insane that they have 10 players on this list. That's more than any other team. 10 players is more than the 4 AFC South teams combined on that list. There's 9, right? Yeah, 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 is 9. Yeah. That's incredible. And that's why they're the favorites to come out of the NFC. By the way, they should be the favorites to win the Super Bowl over the Ravens and the Bills, who are both favored over them. Now, maybe the long season wears them down. It's really tough to repeat and go back-to-back because you're coming back off of a shortened offseason. The Eagles were incredibly healthy last year. Like that really matters. right? They're probably not going to be as healthy this year as they were last year. They had all 22 players that started in the wild card round for them started week 1 as well. So they had an unprecedented amount of health luck last year. So that's probably going to be a little bit different, but this roster's deep, and all their best players play really important positions. Like when you go through the list and you look at the 10 guys that are on that top 100 list, like there's like 2 corners and multiple defensive linemen. They're both of their offensive tackles. One is 13th and the other is 14th. And it's like why are the Eagles good every year? Oh, it's because their best players, Jalen Hurts is on the list as well. Like their best players their best players play the most important positions because not all positions are weighed equally. And we see that with quarterbacks. Like that is the most important position on the field. We equate wins and losses to quarterbacks because they have the greatest impact on who wins and who loses. So the Eagles not being the favorites to repeat is kind of insane to me. And the Colts are going to be bad. That's what I took away from that list. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, the nice thing about the Colts being bad is you could capitalize on it. You could, take some money, bet them under 7.5. If you think they're going to be really bad, you could bet them under 6.5. Get a little more juice for yourself, right? In addition to that, when we come back here in about 4 minutes, Hall of Fame game. It's tonight. Lions and Chargers. Can't wait. I am waiting for Major League Baseball trades to go through, as I'm assuming we're going to have more and more of them here as the day goes on, with today being the Major League Baseball trade deadline tonight at 6 o'clock. So when we come back here in about 4 minutes, a few more thoughts on the Hall of Fame game and some bets to look at for this upcoming NFL season.
It may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on X. Maybe you're watching on X __ Jonathan Smith if you want to follow me there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Now, Colts football season, it's almost here. We have the Colts' first preseason game a week from today, which is actually exciting. The Colts are really the only preseason team worth watching this year because there's actually something to watch. Like the Lions and the Chargers are going to play tonight, and the best players aren't going to play. And, like unless you're a big Hendon Hooker fan, if there's any Tennessee Volunteer fans listening, then maybe you'll watch. But that is about the only reason. Because Justin Herbert probably not going to play. Jared Goff's probably not going to play. So on and so forth. So we'll see how it goes. But hey, maybe you're a degenerate and you want to bet Lions and Chargers tonight. The line is 1.5, which is just, I enjoy my football a lot. That being said, probably not gonna bet Lions Chargers Hall of Fame game tonight. That would just be, pass on that. I like knowing the players that I'm betting on. Maybe that's just me, but I'm not really sure. Speaking of betting, I did a really good job last year with my futures, just betting the overs and the unders. I've got 11 right now that I'm looking at pretty hard in terms of I might take or I might not take. I was looking at some other futures last night as well. And the MVP award is an interesting thing to me because Lamar Jackson is a heavy favorite at plus 430 to win an MVP. And then Josh Allen and Joe Burrow were tied for second at plus 600. And then Patrick Mahomes is fourth in the odds at plus 650. And Patrick Mahomes at plus 650 just makes a lot of sense. Like, that the Chiefs are going to be good. And that Patrick Mahomes is going to be a large part of that, right? He hasn't won an MVP since 2022. And kind of feels like it's been too long. I get it. It's only been 2 seasons, but come on. This guy's only the best player in the sport. Joe Burrow has never won one. So maybe this is the year that he finally breaks through. That is something that I think should 1,000% be worth looking at to potentially bet. Ashton Jeanty is the leader to win Rookie of the Year this year at plus 250. Cameron Ward is second at plus 300. Travis Hunter's plus 1,100. That seems like that's kind of tempting because if he's a really good corner and a really good offensive player doing something that we've never seen happen before in the history of the NFL. And I know Deion Sanders had a season where he played a little bit of offense and he had 36 receptions and that's cool. That being said, Travis Hunter's looking to do both full time. And if he's a pretty good corner and he catches, 85 passes this year for 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then you pair that with the fact that, let's say he has four interceptions. How do you not give the MVP to that guy? Plus 1,100? Kind of tempting. What I'd really like to happen one of these days is for me to get on here and look at, the preseason odds for all these different things and for, to see Colts guys sitting at the top. And that just isn't an option. It's just not. Because as I've said multiple times today, there's just not a lot of great players on this Colts team. And that is really what's keeping them from moving up kind of to that next level where they're a consistent playoff team. Because they've been a consistent 8-9, 9-8 team for what feels like the last 5 years. And it's because there's just not enough great players on the roster. And I think that's especially the case this year. Running it back, once again, I get it. They added like three players, Tyler Warren, Cam Bynum, and Travarius Ward that are actually going to show up and be able to contribute. But aside from that, it is a lot of the same guys who win 8 games every year. At some point, like you age out of that. At some point, your roster gets old, and this Colts roster, it's not old, but it's not exactly young either. So I don't know. I'm not going to touch that Colts 7.5 over under. Because one way or the other, I don't think I'd be surprised. Like if the Colts won 7 games, I don't think people would be surprised by that. If they won 9 games, like I don't think that'd be the most surprising thing either. Now, there are some other bets that I am eyeing though. And one of them that I really like is the Packers over 9.5 wins at plus 105. What I may do instead though is bet them to win the division at plus 250 to win the NFC North. I think the Lions are going to take a step back with two new coordinators and multiple new offensive linemen. The Vikings are going to take a step back because I'm not convinced that JJ McCarthy is going to be the guy. Like so far, every quarterback from that draft class, we feel pretty good about. Like Bo Nix was good. Obviously, Jayden Daniels was really good. Caleb Williams, 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions last year. I get it. He took too many sacks, but like he wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. And the history of the NFL tells us that 25% of quarterbacks drafted in the first round since 2000 go on to be legitimate superstar high-level quarterbacks. About another 25% of them are good, decent starters, and then the other half end up being backups somewhere. So the math, if it's mathing, then you're telling me that JJ McCarthy probably doesn't pan out. So, and then who else is in the NFC North? Who's the last team in that division? As I am blanking right now. Either way, the Packers at plus 250 to win that division seems to me like a pretty decent bet. And the last team in the NFC North is the Chicago Bears. So maybe they pique your interest. They don't really pique mine. So Packers over 9.5 wins makes a lot of sense to me. Jordan Love, the biggest procrastinator in the sport, right? The first 8 weeks, pretty below average. And then the last 9 weeks, when he looks up and realizes that, the playoffs are 2 months away, all of a sudden, boom, he kicks it into high gear and he just doesn't throw interceptions and throws a million touchdown passes. He's done that 2 years in a row now. If he can just put it together for the full season, then the Packers can undoubtedly win that division, and they can definitely win 10 games. If you bet them over 9.5 wins, they get you to plus 105. My favorite bet is the Raiders at over 7.5 wins. Sorry, an Adam Schefter report came through and that I thought was new, and I don't think that it is. It's not. Anyway, the Raiders, this might be my favorite bet. Over 7.5 wins is plus 145. Can the Raiders, who won 4 games last year with Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and Desmond Ridder in arguably the toughest division in the NFL, can they double their win total by bringing in Geno Smith and replacing head coach Antonio Pierce with Pete Carroll? I say absolutely. Better coach, better quarterback, arguably the two most important things on a team. Pete Carroll is also a defensive-minded head coach, and that is really kind of where the Raiders need help. They brought back Max Crosby, a real dominant edge rusher. The question is the back end of the defense. Like how does that pan out? Okay, so with Pete Carroll, I think that he kind of helps elevate that a little bit. And the schedule, not that tough. Not that tough, aside from the divisional games. So they open up at New England. It's a very winnable game. They get the Chargers at home. It's probably a loss. They're at the Commanders. That's probably a loss. So you're starting 1-2. And then you get the Bears at home. That game is winnable. I don't like saying that this game's a win or this game's a loss in the NFL because these are pros and bizarre things happen every single week. So Patriots and Bears both seem winnable. At the Colts is incredibly winnable. That's 3. The Titans at home is incredibly winnable. That's 4. On the road at Kansas City, it's not winnable. Sorry, it's just not. Jacksonville at home, very winnable. Denver on the road is going to be tough. Dallas at home is very winnable. That's 6. Cleveland at home is very winnable. That's 7. At the Chargers is tough. Denver at home is tough. At Philly's tough. At Houston is tough. The Giants at home is very winnable. Boom, there's 8. And then they close the season with Kansas City at home, who might be resting guys. There's 9, maybe, if they're resting guys. Either way, that's assuming that they go 0-6 in their division, which doesn't happen. You have to be so bad to go 0-6 in your own division. And the Raiders with Geno Smith and Pete Carroll aren't going to be Cleveland Browns bad, because they really seem to be the only team that goes 0-6 in their divisional game. So really like the Raiders over 7.5 wins at plus 145. That is so far my favorite bet of the upcoming season. So, and by the way, Zach Gray, he's going to join the show tomorrow. Awesome dude who is getting married in like a week. And he's like, no, Jonathan, I'm still coming on the show. So big shout out to Zach Gray. We're going to run over these over-under bets with him tomorrow. So can't wait for that. I think my second favorite bet is the Steelers over 8.5 wins. They won 10 games with Russell Wilson last year. You know, here it comes. Everyone's favorite Steelers stat. Mike Tomlin never had a losing season. At this point, I'm convinced that Mike Tomlin could win 9 games with me as his starting quarterback. But good news for Steeler fans. He's got a much better quarterback than me in Aaron Rodgers, who I would argue is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson, who he won 10 games with last year. And the real reason why I like them is because the Steelers spend money like the U.S. government. The United States has the largest military defense budget in the world, and the Steelers have the most expensive defense in the NFL. They spend more money on their defense than any other team in the league. Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Jalen Ramsey, now Darius Slay, they signed him in the offseason. Patrick Queen. You can just keep running through it. So they should have one of, if not the best defense in the NFL. That with Aaron Rodgers throwing to the likes of DK Metcalf and Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith and a good run game, like that should be enough for 10 wins with a schedule that outside of the divisional games doesn't really seem all that daunting. Right? Like it's not super tough. Like at the Jets feels very winnable. At Seattle at home's winnable. At New England's winnable. The Vikings at home feels pretty winnable. JJ McCarthy against that defense is going to be tough. The Browns at home is winnable. At Cincinnati is winnable because the Bengals I don't think are going to be very good this year. The Packers at home will be tough. The Colts at home very winnable. At the Chargers that'll be tough. Cincinnati at home is very winnable. Like that's already 8, and we're at week 11. At Chicago is very winnable. Buffalo at home will be tough. Baltimore on the road will be tough. Miami at home, like that's winnable. That's 10 winnable games already, and they still get to play Cleveland one more time. So over 8.5 wins for them for the Steelers seems to make a lot of sense. So when we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Sophie Cunningham. She has her own podcast now. I know so many Fever fans are just over the moon excited. They also won last night, 6-2 now in their last 8 games. So when we come back here in about 4 minutes, Sophie Cunningham's podcast, which I'm not really in love with. But that being said, I'm not as upset at this player podcast as some of the other ones that I've heard. And I'll tell you why when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Let's see, if something costs less, a lot less, but people are actually happier with it, that sounds like something to look into. And that's MetaShare. Maybe you've heard joining MetaShare can save you or your family up to $500 a month. And that's huge, but it's also true. People are just happier with it. They love being part of something that reflects and promotes their values and what they believe in. MetaShare works too. It's been around for 30 years now, and members have shared more than 7 billion.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Very excited about tomorrow. Zach Gray is going to join the show at this time. We'll talk about the trade deadline. We are a month away from week one of the college football season, where we'll have Texas and Ohio State playing against each other. And that's going to be awesome. I am a huge fan of the intermingling of conferences in the regular season when it comes to college football, because it's nice to know which conference is better. Like it is. And the bowl games, because so many players sit out now, like it's tough to tell which conferences are better than others. So college football, we're a month away. If you're an Indiana fan, then college football is like a little over a month away, because those first 3 games, I don't even know if I'd classify those games as college football games, given the fact that, they're playing 3 FCS schools, it seems like, which, as I've said, I'm not ripping Indiana for that. That's what I think every team in Indiana's situation should do. Because like if you're Ohio State or Texas, like they're playing week one, those 2 teams are good enough to go win other tough games to kind of build that resume back up. I'm not convinced that Indiana is this year. So, go 10-2 with 2 losses to Oregon and Penn State. And then maybe, you catch a break and you make the playoff again. And then everyone in the state of Indiana, unless you're a Purdue fan, goes crazy and they're happy for you. Sophie Cunningham, a lot of people are happy for her. because she has a podcast now. The Volume, owned by Colin Cowherd, signed her to do a podcast. And her co-host is a dude from Love Island. Bleh. And they're like friends going way back. And people are going to watch it because the people who host the podcast are very attractive. And Sophie Cunningham has done something so incredibly smart. She has attached herself to Caitlin Clark in the opposite way that Angel Reese has. You know, Angel Reese has been kind of framed as Caitlin Clark's enemy. Like she is enemy number one when it comes to Caitlin Clark. Sophie Cunningham, she is best friend number one when it comes to Caitlin Clark. Like the smartest, biggest moment of her professional career was when she tackled that girl who fouled Caitlin. Just tackled her. Didn't make a play on the ball. You know, just boom, form tackle. Actually, I heard that the Colts were going to invite her out to training camp to teach Zaire Franklin and the rest of these linebackers how to tackle. That way they don't miss as many tackles this year. So good job, Sophie. I hope that teaching session goes really well for you. But I am not a fan of any professional athlete having a podcast while they're playing. The exception being Draymond Green, because he's won 4 championships and he won one of those titles after he started his podcast. So he's clearly capable of doing both and playing well while doing both. But I think the majority of athletes can't do that. I think it's really tough to split your attention between two things and be great at both. I really appreciate what Kobe Bryant did. Played in the league for 20 years, you know, was a great basketball player for a long time. Didn't do really anything media related, even though he had an interest in it. He waited until he retired. So after he retired, he writes this thing. I believe it was called I Love Basketball, and he won an Emmy, or an Oscar. He won an award for it, whatever it was. And that's just kind of how I think athletes should kind of go about doing stuff. I don't mind Carmelo Anthony having a podcast right now because he's Carmelo Anthony and he's not playing anymore. You know, Gilbert Arenas, who I know just got in a lot of trouble. I don't like his podcast, but what else is he going to do? Right? He doesn't have a season to get ready for or a game to get ready for in 3 nights. So I'm a much bigger fan of guys after they retire doing a podcast. Jeff Teagues is perfect because you can't tell every story. You can't give every opinion that you have when you're still in the league because you're competing with and against guys every night that you're talking about on your podcast. And so anyway, Sophie Cunningham's podcast, I don't like, but I don't mind per se. I don't think it's a bad thing because Angel Reese has her podcast and it spews a lot of nonsense. Okay. If someone wanted to tell me it spewed nothing but nonsense, then I'd be like, sure, man. I don't really know. I've never listened to it. I've just seen the clips, and the clips are not great. And it's very anti-Caitlin Clark. And I feel like a lot of media is anti-Caitlin Clark. And when it comes to Sophie Cunningham's podcast, it's going to be very, very pro-Caitlin Clark. I can say that with the utmost confidence because this is the one clip that we have, or at least that I've seen, from her first podcast episode when she's talking about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA.
And it literally pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league.
Who would be?
What?
Sabrina? No.
No, there's really good, well-known people in our league. I'm not discrediting them. We have a lot of badasses in our league.
Yeah.
Hell yeah to that. I'm all for that. But when people try to argue that she's not the face of our league,
Yeah.
or if our league would be where we're at without her, you're dumb as
Yeah.
You're literally dumb as
I love it when it's just such an obvious thing to say. Obviously, Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA. Sophie Cunningham right there, just letting it be known. And it's so funny. It doesn't need to be said. It kind of reminds me of when, a politician or someone at some sort of rally is we need world peace. And then everyone cheers. It's yeah, I think that would be a good thing. I think everyone would like that. But it's such an obvious thing. And then you say it and then everyone's like, yes, absolutely. And that's kind of how I picture all of the Caitlin Clark fans reacting to Sophie Cunningham saying that. Yes, Absolutely, Sophie. You are so correct. It's so obvious. But anyway, I know people love Sophie Cunningham because, the dudes like her because she's attractive, I guess. And she tackled that one girl. She's like Caitlin Clark's bodyguard. And so all the Caitlin Clark fans love her because of that. Before last night, she hadn't really been playing very well. By the way, the Fever won last night. And so, so like all the love for her wasn't because of how she's been playing. All the love for her has come with all the stuff that she does off the court, all the TikToks and the pregame outfits and, the way that she's kind of stood up for Caitlin Clark in a way that we didn't really see Caitlin Clark's teammates do last year. So there is an appreciation for Sophie Cunningham from that side of things because the WNBA, it's kind of like the 80s and 90s in the NBA. There's like you have to have an enforcer. Like you have to have someone on your team that when someone goes at your superstar, you have to have someone who is going to be like, like you can't do that to my teammate, to the best player on my team. I think that was part of the issue with the Fever last year. Like their opponents would foul Caitlin really hard, and then like nothing would happen. Like there was no consequence for that. And now when you play the Fever, that if you foul Caitlin Clark hard, Sophie Cunningham is going to foul you or your best player equally as hard. So, like, there is, from me at least, a slight appreciation for Sophie Cunningham kind of from that standpoint. But at the same time, you can do the podcast. It just has to sound like that, right? It has to be you continuing to defend Caitlin Clark. Like, it doesn't need to be anything else. It needs to be that. Like that little soundbite that we heard. It needs to be that on repeat. Just nothing but her standing up for and defending her teammate. Because, like, let's just be honest. Like, I don't think, and this isn't me being mean, I think this is just the reality of it. People don't like Sophie Cunningham because she's Sophie Cunningham. People like Sophie Cunningham because she is connected to Caitlin Clark. Simple as that. So make it about Caitlin Clark, not about Sophie Cunningham and that dude that she's hosting the podcast with. The Major League Baseball trade deadline is going on right now. Okay. It ends tonight, 6:00. Trades are being made. Apparently the Cubs have already made not one, but two trades. I missed both of them, which isn't good. I got to be on top of that, on top of that kind of stuff, because you could make multiple, you could make multiple arguments for who the second best team in the National League is, right? But I think it's pretty clear that, the best team in the NL is the Dodgers. By the way, the Cubs, two trades. They traded for two pitchers. They're bringing in Mike Soroka from the Washington Nationals. They're also bringing in Andrew Kittredge from the Baltimore Orioles. And, both of those guys are just overjoyed because the Nationals are terrible and the Baltimore Orioles are kind of struggling right now. So, yeah, like that's just got to be the best feeling. Like, that there's guys in clubhouses all over the country right now, just like, please trade me. Please trade me. Which I find pretty funny. Michael Soroka, that's his real name. Not great this year. 4.87 ERA. That's not great. In 16 starts, gotta bring that down a little bit, Mike. Gotta bring that down at least a little bit. The other guy, Andrew Kittredge, pitcher coming over from Baltimore. 3.45 ERA coming out of the bullpen. Not great either. Not great either. But that's all right, I guess. ERA is a weird thing. The Cubs do have a pretty solid defense, so maybe that'll help these guys. Look, the guys making those trades know a lot more about it than I do, so I'm not really going to question what they're doing. But the Dodgers feel like they're just kind of heads and shoulders above everyone in the National League. They kind of feel like they're heads and shoulders above everyone in baseball, period. I mean, they're just loaded. Shohei Ohtani's going to win MVP again. He's pitching this year, and he's been really good on the bump. He's also been really good at the plate. That's why he's like minus 2,500 to win the MVP. In the National League. American League, it's a little more interesting. Aaron Judge is still the favorite, but Cal Raleigh, Raleigh, excuse me, he's really kind of closed the gap. He's the catcher for the Mariners who's going to hit like 50 home runs this year. It's really impressive what he's doing. But so the thing that I'm really kind of watching for today is, can any of these teams in the National League make a big enough move for me to kind of feel like, yes, this Colts team yes, this Cubs team can compete with the Dodgers, or yes, the Brewers can really compete with the Dodgers or the Padres or whoever it is, because it still just kind of feels like the Dodgers are a little ways above everyone else. We've got some Colts news. The Colts have signed cornerbacks Trey Herndon and Duke Shelley and they placed cornerback David Long Jr. on IR, and they also released tight end Alberts. I'm not even going to try to say that last name. So, congratulations. So, yeah, big news today for the Colts. Does that get them to 8 wins on the season? It might. It just might. Not really. Colts are going to be bad this year, unless they stay incredibly healthy. That's always the thing, right? When you're betting over-unders, if you just bet the over on whoever the healthiest team in the NFL is going to be, then it's hard not to feel pretty good about them. Like, if you got like a crystal ball and the crystal ball was like, the Carolina Panthers are going to have 0 injuries all year, then I would immediately take the Panthers over. Because injuries in the NFL feels like they have a bigger impact than in any other sport, just because there's so many guys and these play callers on both offense and defense, like, they're so smart that, like, as soon as you have any sort of, wound or issue, like, they just press it and press it and press it until you find an answer. So that's really the biggest thing with these over-under bets. You just got to bet on a team that you think is going to be healthy. That's going to do it here on The Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back in tomorrow from 10 to noon. Zach Gray, professional sports gambler, he'll join me at 11:40 as he normally does. We'll talk about some of these over-under bets. We are a month away from the start of college football, so I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit as well when he comes on tomorrow. So can't wait for that. Going to be a blast, as it always is. The Dan Acker Show comes your way next. Jonathan Hutton, he'll be on at 12:30, and we've got John McClain, who covers the Texans. He'll be on at 2:30, so nice football field show for you with the Dan Acker Show, which comes your way next. Once again, I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon, and I'll talk to you then.